A valuable asset to any mixer is a VU meter, especially when it comes to mixing today's louder music like trap or hip hop, which tends to be very loud compared to pop music or like alternative rock, typically because of the amount of low end that's present in the drum material and the bass material. The reason why I love VU meters is because they mimic how we hear. So before I get into how they're engineered, I want to talk about something called equal loudness curves. Human beings are sensitive to certain frequencies and less sensitive to other frequencies. Lower frequencies we happen to not be that sensitive to, which is why I think they're so appealing to us, because when we get enough of them and we hear them the same way we perceive higher frequencies, they feel exciting to us. But what that means in a mix is that we're going to need more lower frequencies in our mix in order to feel like we're getting enough, now, and in this genre, more than the higher frequencies. So how do we know when enough is enough in terms of the amount of loudness we hear in these lower frequencies? That's where the VU meter comes in. The VU meter sort of mimics the way we hear, and in terms of how it generalizes loudness. The ballistics on the meter are very slow. It takes about 300 milliseconds for the meter to move to its peak position. What that means is that the transient, which carries the most volume information, doesn't affect the meter readout, right? A peak meter, like what you would find in your DAW, will read that instantaneous transient, and you'll see this big spike in volume. So if you're leveling, let's say, a kick or even a bass, which are very important in the genre, and you see your peak meter go really high, what it's telling you is the beginning of that sound that may have happened so fast that you weren't able to actually hear it because you're a human being. That's loud to the computer, but is it loud to you? The VU meter is slow enough where you could make a better judgment that, yeah, that's going to be loud to not just me, but to anybody else who's hearing it. Any human that's listening is going to confirm that we're hearing somewhat the same thing. Now, everybody's different. We all hear things differently, but the VU meter is great to make a generalization in terms of loudness. Another thing is that it will tell you how much information is being put into your song in terms of frequency information if you have a mixing game plan that includes balancing your anchor instruments. Now, in this genre, our anchor instruments is kick and the 808, so we could level that at a point, meaning we could move it up, we can move the faders up after we process the tone that we like, move the faders up, take a look at our VU meter and say, okay, the VU meter says it's loud. And is this loud enough to bring a vocal underneath it, which has a lot of frequencies that we're naturally sensitive to, and will we be able to perceive both and enjoy that balance? The VU meter will confirm that for you. Another great thing about a VU meter is if I'm putting that low-end information up and the VU meter is kicking, but I don't hear it, well, then I have a discrepancy between either my speakers in my room or my speakers in terms of their frequency response. So if I have a big 808 and I put it up and the VU meter is pinned, and by pinned I mean the needle's going all the way to the end of the meter, but I'm not hearing or feeling heavy bass, chances are I have a monitoring discrepancy. So not only is it great for creating a balance in your mix, it's good to diagnose problems in your monitoring environment. So let me show you a VU plugin that I like to use when I'm working in the box. The VU meter I use when working in the box is something called Klanghelm VU MT. It's relatively cheap and extremely accurate. In fact, I would say this behaves exactly the same way as my analog VU meter, which is a Coleman VU meter, because I don't typically mix in the box most of the time. But when I do, I'm using this. But when I'm calibrating my system, I still use this digital VU meter because I can get a more precise needle read, whereas the analog one, I'm just basically glancing at every so often to make sure the needles are in a geographic location that I feel is appropriate for whatever program content is running through it. So in order to use the plug-in version of a VU meter, like the way you would use it if you had an analog console, is you would place the plugin after the final processing plugin on your mix bus. So for example, let's say we have a mix, and on the mix bus I have a compressor and an EQ. I would then place the VU meter. Now, if you are using a limiter on your mix bus in order to bring up volume, you would want to put the VU meter before any type of mix bus maximization, because then you won't get an accurate read. To get the most out of the VU, it needs to be pre any volume maximization. The goal is to have a readout of your balance and understand more how the frequencies that you're boosting manipulate that needle. So use the VU to sort of connect the dots between what's coming out of your speakers, how you're balancing things, and as a visual aid. You don't want to rely on it. I'm not gonna give you any blueprint numbers like put your kick here, because every song is different, and my anchor numbers for each genre varies. My anchor numbers for each song varies. At the end of the day, always use your ears, but use a VU to reinforce what you're hearing.